self-love, masturbation, that's even more practical and more attainable and something most of us do also, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that the most important sexual relationship you're ever going to have is the one that you have with yourself. Hi.
Hey, Shelby, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Where are you at? New York?
I'm in New York. Yeah. You're in Chicago?
Man,
Beautiful city. Great city.
great for food too, if you like to eat. So that's something to watch out for.
Awesome. I'm so excited. Thanks for having me on the show today.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to have you. This is going to be cool. I have about 1 billion questions, so hopefully we can do some self-discovery and educate others and all these things in between.
Awesome. I'm ready. I'm ready when you are.
I was born ready. Well, you know what? I want to start out. Tell whoever's watching is who, by the way, is Shelby Sells like your actual real birth name? Because that'd be the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, it is. And it's like the most frequent question that I get asked.
It's so catchy. It's like almost like a gimmicky kind of name. Like, oh, she must have created it or something, you know?
I know. Remember MySpace? People are always like,
Yeah.
"Was that just your old MySpace name?" I'm like, nope. I was blessed with a good one, so I thought I'd get in the business.
Hey, well, it's fitting in that way. You were meant to be in that case. So tell me a little bit about you. What should people know? So you do coaching. You're an expert when it comes to sex and life and everything in between and love. So tell me a little bit about who is Shelby Sells.
Well, that's a good question. I started in this career path. I used to live in LA, and I started a blog probably like 10 years ago now, almost interviewing friends, colleagues, artists, strangers about their experiences with love and sex and dating. It kind of spawned from just going out all the time and meeting a bunch of people. And I'm always the friend that's like, okay, who are you
Yeah.
who are you hooking up with? Tell me your crazy sex stories. And then
Which everyone does, by the way. Any friends, like girls or guys, this is exactly what we do all the time.
I love it. I love it. The good, the bad, the ugly, the pleasurable. I'm like, it's so interesting to me to see just how unique everyone's personal experiences are.
That's
And
cool.
so,
And it kind of spawned off, huh? After that.
yeah. Yeah, I moved to New York. I went back to school. I got my coaching license, and I just thought that I was like, maybe I should take this a little bit more seriously. And now it's turned into a full-fledged career for me. I couldn't be happier.
Wow. Could you envision that years ago before that? It's kind of like a personal interest, right? That turned into, that's the best way to have a career, right? Just to have something you're curious about naturally and just build on it.
Yeah. And the great thing about sex and love and dating is that there's no necessarily like right answer. It's so, like I said, I keep repeating myself, but it's so unique for everyone and I think that's what keeps the spark alive. Like these topics have been around forever. Like if we had a distinct answer, we would all be in utopia right now. But life is complex and so are we, and that's okay. So it keeps it interesting.
Totally does. And hey, we all can relate to it or, in some sort of way. It's one inevitable thing about life. It's breathing, it's water, and it's sex, right?
Yeah, we want to connect. We're as humans, we're innately born to connect. So definitely.
Yeah, no matter what, you can deep down inside, you have the urge to connect with another human being physically and emotionally, no matter what stage or point in your life, it's like an innate desire that we have that we can't change really.
From birth. Yeah. As children.
That's crazy to think about it. That that's the one thing that's been around probably since the start of mankind. Like it's crazy to think it dates back to so many centuries and generations, and it almost fascinates me. Kind of like, ooh, how did they do it in like the medieval times and stuff like that?
I would be curious to know. It would be cool to just take a time machine back and be like,
Maybe they were more freer about it than we sort of kind of become, in the 20th century and whatnot.
I think there's definitely been phases, you look at the Greeks, like you look at these periods of times and you're like, oh, and then, yeah, I mean, I could go off forever about this kind of stuff, but there's a natural, I think, ebb and flow to sex and relationships. And so it's always interesting to see where we're at, where we've been, and, contemplate where we're going.
Absolutely. I'm on the movie end, I talk about films and television. It always made me wonder too, is that when you go to Europe, like Germany or one of these countries like that, you turn on TV in the daytime, you have you see naked people on screen. Like sex isn't taboo. And I grew up in Europe, actually. I grew up in Poland. So for me, it was just kind of it wasn't, when I came to the US, it was like a different kind of view of sex, and it was more guarded. And, I kind of came up in a free environment, where you can do, you free as a kid, technically run around anywhere. You don't have to worry about someone abducting you or any of these things. But, you turn on the TV and you see these things and you don't get fazed by it. But then in America, it's like a different kind of cultural thing. It's always been sort of taboo, like, oh, we're hiding about it. We're looking at porn online, and so no one knows about it. I wonder, why have we been like this as a society compared, in the US particularly versus other parts of the world? And will that ever change, or are we making a change so slowly but surely into being more open and free, not having sex be the taboo while violence and gore is completely cool and normal?
Yeah, well, one, I think that you're in a really awesome field. I love film and television. I think that it's so important, and it has such a huge role when we're talking about subjects like this.
Yeah.
But I will say that from my experience and my understanding, the US was kind of born out of this puritanical mindset, and I think religion has played a pretty big influence on the way people and view sex and sexuality. And so the way America was founded, what had this very limited view of sex, a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, everything under kind of like the church or whatever. And so I think that that's still being carried for a lot of folks, definitely not for everyone, but I think that it started to become like a pillar in our society, which is interesting because sex sells, it's ingrained in all of our advertising and and in a lot of TV shows now, and movies and all the things like that. But you look back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, there was nudity. And then I feel like it kind of went away. And then now I feel like it's kind of coming back. So I feel like right now is a really special time for sex. I think that people are starting to broaden their perspective and not view sex as such again, like a shameful act, or having desire, or appreciating the beauty of a naked body. I think that people are starting to kind of open up, hopefully, their hearts and minds around being like, okay, how can I look at people without actually having to necessarily sexualize them? I think that that's a huge part of it, is when it's so forbidden, then anything close to it, you're sexualizing it, right? You can sexualize a piece of fruit, you know what I mean? But the fruit is just a fruit. But if if it's so forbidden, then, oh my God, then it's this whole thing.
Right. So it makes it a bigger deal, right? Then it's kind of that emphasis on it. Yep.
Yeah.
So, you can't do that. Then it's like, oh, I want to do that just despite it.
Oh my God, a million times more. I think that is a very human response, a reaction. But yeah, I think that what I'm seeing, at least, and what I'm hoping for, is a nice balance between, learning how to communicate our desires and feel comfortable in them, but also not having to, I don't know, be maybe so overtly sexual or sexualize everything. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. It does. It's kind of it's simpler than people make it out to be, Like I feel like dating too with online dating, people complicate shit so much by not being just kind of upfront with what they want or not, and just like trying to weave different messages, and it just complicates everything. I always feel like dating shouldn't be as tough as it is.
People don't know what they want. And that's totally normal, but we're not really taught about these kinds of things. And at least like informal education in the US that I can speak about, we're not really taught about this kind of stuff. We learn from what we see on TV, what our family dynamics were like, friendships, things like that. So we don't really have a good guide. And that's kind of what has drawn me to this profession and what I'm hoping. There's so many great people working in this field, and I'm hoping that it'll be normal to kind of like start educating people, even in like proper school systems, about sex in a way that's not just like, you only have sex when you're married, and like if you have sex, you're gonna get an STI and die.
And scare the hell out of everyone. Yep.
It's so scary, and it really doesn't need to be. We need to liberate ourselves from all of this shame. When it's natural. It's when like you said earlier, from the dawn of time, we've been doing this. So why in 2021 are we still feeling a type of way about it?
Oh, it kind of reminds me, I remember being in sex ed as like a sophomore or something in high school. And we were talking, I literally still it's hilarious to me. Like the big theme of the day was the female condom. I have not seen this in my life. Okay. I don't know what a female condom, I remember it was like, who's this a female? It was like a bag, literally like a bag of something. I'm like, what is this? Like, am I going to see, I've never seen it in my life after that class or no use of it, but it was like so useless and like not practical to what happens in real life. I never had a girl like reach for her desk or be like, hey, here's a female condom.
The elusive female condom. So
it's crazy, but it's like it leads into what you're saying. It's some of the stuff that needs to be like reinstituted or more modernized, because like this stuff is not really realistic, like in the everyday world. And you're teaching that to like young people, right? Versus having some like kind of real and honest conversations about it. Like this could happen. This is, what it is. This is what you're going to encounter most likely.
It's not the end of the world. You know what I mean? There are so many resources and so many different ways to practice safe sex. There are so many, like I said, resources to go to if something happens, if you do get an STI, if you do get pregnant on accident or whatever it is that you're dealing with, like there's a lot going on that we're just never taught about. And I really like the word that you used, practical. Is that shouldn't our education systems be setting us up for like they always say the real world, but some of it is kind of a fantasy, and like some of it hits you in the face as an adult where you're just like, boom, okay. But ultimately we all want to have a good relationship, like with ourselves, with our sex life, and hopefully with our partners, so more of that.
One topic that always fascinates me, and I'm kind of like you. I mean, you're the expert. I'm not, but I'm just curious about these things. And I have conversations even when I'm dating around or whatnot. It's like another topic always fascinates me is masturbation. It's always we're talking about taboo. That's the sort of thing. I think women are starting to come out of their shell about being more open about like, yeah, I do it. Guys tend to be the ones that like, oh yeah, kind of have the jokes with it and more open about it. But women were always kind of secluded or ashamed in a sense about masturbation. I think that's finally thankfully coming, kind of more open about it. What about that topic that kind of makes it taboo? Because I feel that's we're talking about sex, but self-love, masturbation, that's even more practical and more attainable and something most of us do also, right?
Yeah. Well, I think that the most important sexual relationship you're ever going to have is the one that you have with yourself. And I think to your question about why has it been so taboo, especially for women, is that, without being too crass, like the vagina has always been maybe demonized as too strong of a word, but it's always been made out to be like not fun. You know what I mean? Like when we're younger, people are always like, ew, vaginas are gross. They smell.
Cooties, remember that stuff?
Yeah, they're too complicated. And it's a
Yeah.
lot of negativity in describing it when actually like vaginas are beautiful. They're capable of so much. They taste amazing. And like,
Agreed. I'm a fan.
yeah, right. It's just having a different shift in perspective where I think people are starting to be more comfortable with themselves, with their bodies, and also just our world being like, okay, can we stop this narrative is false. Okay. It's very immature and it's very closed-minded. You know what I mean? So I think again, it is just this liberation of people being more comfortable with their bodies, which is so, 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 so important.
And now, like, we have all sorts of vibrators you can get at like places, order them online too, right? I'm always fascinated to think what's the new thing out. You know, there goes from rabbits to like all sorts of things that are on the market. I mean, obviously I don't use them, but there's a lot of stuff out there for women, you know.
You should have one just in case, or if you have a partner, have one together. I mean, they come in handy in the bedroom all the time. And they're definitely, I know I have some male clients that are a little weary about sex toys. And I'm like, these are your friends, not your foe. Okay. Like,
that's another thing too. Exactly. I think men, it comes more to men. They're more intimidated. Like, oh, is she using a sex toy? That means I'm not good enough. Like, I always felt that sort of, I personally don't care, you know, if a woman wears, like, uses it, do whatever helps you, you know, even when we're doing it in an act. But I feel like a lot of men and friends I've talked to have been like, oh no, I don't want like a vibrator, especially if I'm there. Aren't I enough? You know, that sort of mentality, I think it's been prevalent around men a lot.
yeah. Well, I think that sex itself has been centered around men and male pleasure for a long time. And I know that, like, again, if something is foreign to you, it might seem intimidating, you know, that again is a pretty normal response. But I think that that points to the ego, right? Like, why aren't I enough? It's like, it's not about you, you know, it feels good. And if it feels good, why wouldn't I do it? It's like if you get a hamburger and you really like cheese on your hamburger, you know, and the chef is like, well, isn't it good enough without the cheese? And you're like, well, I mean, it is. It's great, but I just want a little cheese on my hamburger.
A little extra, right?
Yeah.
That's a well put away. I think, hey, especially with me and food, I can totally relate to that. So
it came to me. So yeah.
that's awesome. But yeah, I feel like I hope we're at a point now that, you know, these things become kind of normal and women feel liberated enough in a sense to admit that and not have to hide or feel shame about, you know, masturbating. Because I feel like in a lot of ways, like, sometimes better to do it than, you know, go around randomly just to do it, right? There's other ways to satisfy without having to go out of your way, right?
Oh yeah, definitely. Well, I think you're going to a good point where like communication is everything in a relationship. And that's, I think, what makes relationships so complicated is because so many of us are struggling to communicate. It's difficult to know what you want. It's
Yeah.
difficult to know how to express that to a partner, you know, even if you do know exactly what you want, being able to frame that to somebody in a way that they will receive it well, it can be complicated, you know, but also I think about sex and about centering male pleasure for so long, you know, we're finally, and like in a lot of TV and film lately, we're seeing women kind of like reclaim their power, right?
Yeah.
Their sexuality. And so I think it's really important to note that, like, you know, in terms of, I guess, eliminating these stigmas about women, about vaginas, like a lot of women, their male partners aren't going down on them as much as males are, or women are going down on men. You know what I
Right.
mean?
That's kind of another thing that's kind of like, yeah, that's been societal too. Like, oh, give me head, you know, like that's like sort of a given. But when it comes to you going down on them, it's like, oh, I don't, you know, it's not as open or spoke about, or it's as part of the sex, right?
Yeah. So I did a campaign with Ashley Madison that's called Sexual Health as well.
Mhm.
And they gave me so many insightful statistics from their data set from all of their users, anonymously, of course. But one of their stats said 59% of women report rarely or never receiving oral sex from their primary partner. Like these are
Wow.
couples that have been married for a long time. And I'm like, 59%?
60%. Yeah. Wow.
Oh my God. I would go crazy. I mean, and it's just sad because, you know, not everyone likes it and that's fine. But if you do like it, it feels really good. And it's such an intimate way to connect with your partner. You know, like there's so many different ways to have sex. And I think that our mindset is very small still. Like a lot of folks, you know, we think of sex as like the penis and the vagina and like that's it. And literally like hundreds, thousands of ways to have sex, you know, it depends on what your definition is. So I love that the perspective is shifting. I love that everyone's minds are kind of opening up a little bit. And now we have things like sexting and, you know, like FaceTime sex, Zoom, you know, whatever. And like all these different ways that are like, oh, this is actually sex too. And oh, this is a different form of sex.
That is so true. It is part of that. I love sexting. I mean, I think a lot of people do it, but that's another thing too. It's like, oh, that could get misconstrued too. That's a communication thing too, on two ends where it could be like, especially if you're doing online dating and jumping it about timing and everything, you know, it's a feeling out process too. And how do we kind of do it safely or in a sense where it's not unsolicited too, you know what I mean? Because a lot of women, we talk like, oh, I don't want dick pics or, you know, that sort of stuff, like, which I understand too. It's like randomly you're just getting sent that you don't even know the person really well. Yeah. I don't know what women deal with online. I could imagine it's a lot worse what guys have to deal with these sort of pics and all that. But what is the right way of kind of approaching sort of sexting and like you mentioned, FaceTime, the digital version of sex now that we kind of got used to, especially during a pandemic where we didn't see each other that much or go out to date, right?
Wow, you're bringing up so many wonderful points, Jim. And that is a great question. And the first thing that I will always say about forming any kind of sexual relationship is to get consent. Consent is the most important thing ever. And the funny thing is that like sometimes we bring up consent and people are like, oh, well, how can consent be sexy or like, you know, totally sucks the energy out of the room. And I would challenge that perspective by being like, actually creating consent, one, you can do it in a fun and like cute way, you know, like if you are kind of flirting with somebody, you know, or whatever, and you're kind of catching a vibe, you know, you could be like, hey, like, I'm curious if we can take this, like, I'm really enjoying our conversation. I'm wondering if we can take it up a notch, you know, or do you feel comfortable like with sexting? Have you ever done that? You know, and then if like, no, I don't, then you're like, okay, cool. No worries. Like, are we still on for Friday? Easy peasy. And if they're like, yes, I'm down, then you're like, okay, like, let's do it. And it takes so much of the pressure off too, because then, you know, you can create boundaries, which are really important. And if you're sexting with someone and they're like, oh, actually, I'm not really into that. You're like, okay. Or if they're sexting you and you're like, actually, I don't really like receiving, you know, genitalia photos, then you can just say that, you know, but like getting hit with a random dick pic
you're right.
Or even vagina pic, you know, it happens to everybody. It can be really intense. And so that's why I think that consent is the best practice in online dating and in, you know, real life.
No, I mean, the way you said it too, it's so simple too. You know what I mean? It's just kind of like feeling out someone, right? I mean, you kind of do that when kissing too. You feel out the situation. You just don't go for it, right? It'd be awkward as hell if you're just like leaning in, you know, automatically, like forcefully. Like there's just something about a sense of feeling out and massaging it, right? Into a conversation or whatnot.
Yeah, exactly.
Another topic, I mean, I have an older sister. Me and my sister, we're very open about like our dating and stuff. She's dating, I'm dating, and her friends. So I have these conversations. I'm very open to these things and talking about sex and what is dating like and back and forth. And I constantly hear, at least from like the term of bad sex. What to you constitutes like bad sex? Is there a kind of like a standard definition for it, or is there particulars depending on a person? What is kind of bad sex in a way?
Yeah, you know what? I think that, again, this is one of these things where it's like, it is so dependent on the person. But I would say like some general things would probably be like, if you're too drunk or like
Yeah.
on too many curriculars, however you want to define that,
Yeah, it's no fun.
It's no fun at all, and that's when things get blurry. That's
Yep.
when boundaries get crossed. And that's when, consent, you can't give it when you're under such influence. If consent isn't talked about, if sex isn't safe, like I think that bad sex could be like, if two people are in this heterosexual couple, if two people are having sex and the guy takes off the condom halfway through and doesn't tell the girl.
Oh, that's not good.
That's horrible. That is actually a form of assault. So, you know what I'm saying? I think that it's just, and also.
What about emotional intimacy during it? Because like, I'll tell you, I had a situation where I've been seeing a girl back and forth, like not dating, just kind of hooking up, but like she refused to kiss me. And it really, at some point, it didn't become fun. I didn't want to do this. Like she would turn her head away or just like lock her lips and she wouldn't express why. And I just felt like I got soft like Charmin really quick, because it just wasn't fun. Like that takes away, even if like you don't want that to escalate to maybe a relationship. I feel like if we're doing that, it's not like I need to kiss you, but just knowing that is like off limits and you won't tell me why. And you're like turning your head. It made me feel kind of useless and it took the turn on away from it all. Like what about sort of situations like that where one person doesn't want to voice the why, but it's like clearly evident physically and emotionally that something's off here and not natural?
Well, okay. I will say that you said that you didn't need kissing during sex, but I will say it sounds like you do, and that's fine. If some people don't like kissing during sex, and you can make sex whatever you want and whatever you feel most comfortable with, and so it's just about finding people that are able to meet your needs at the end of the day. And it also sounds like this person that you were hooking up with wasn't able to communicate or didn't feel comfortable communicating, and it sounds like communication is also really important to you, being able to have open and honest dialogue. You said it's in your family, you talk about it with your friends. Like if that's important to you and your needs aren't being met in this situation, it doesn't mean that that person is like bad or wrong or whatever. It just means that simply your needs are not being met in this sexual relationship. And so having that awareness, you're just like, all right, well, yeah, I don't think I can do this anymore because the spark is gone and I'm soft like Charmin, like that's it. My body is literally telling me that I can't do this. So I think that bad sex happens. I think there's also this intense pressure to always have good sex all the time. And I just want to say that it's completely unrealistic. Like,
so true. That's well said.
Porn is a type of film, I would say, right? And film, a lot of it is based off of fantasy, and we're living in reality. We can sprinkle some fantasy in there, but having, especially if you're in like long-term partnerships and stuff like that, to think that you would be having amazing, mind-blowing sex every single time. I mean, if you do, fucking good for you, like
well, that's unrealistic, but yeah, definitely good.
But I will say it's okay to have like okay sex or like whatever,
or quick or like, whatever. Right.
Like in relationships, there's ebbs and flows. I'm not my best self every single day. Sometimes I have an off day, and it's like that in our sex too. So I think it's about like creating some compassion for that. And like in terms of bad sex, if it's just like straight up incompatible, then you're like, all right, we're not doing that. There's some people you're more sexually compatible than others. There's some people you're more emotionally compatible. than others. It's just about finding the best fit for the occasion, the appropriate occasion.
Mm-hmm. I can take that too, because like at some point for me, sex didn't become when you're single, it's interesting because different partners and, I mean, like meeting new people, and sometimes it's short term versus not. And it's tough because like I'm a giver in a sense. Like for me, I like and need to know the idea that the woman was satisfied at the end. Like I hate being that guy, or the thought of the guy like, oh, he just got off, like, because that's a freaking complaint with women. Sometimes guys are selfish, right? Lovers, and just, want to get off and that. And I'm like, that's not my personality, but I like sometimes even more fulfilling for me to have them get off than me, but at some point in like, when you do this, like physically, you hold it in and you just try to go and go and go to a point where like, oh, like my sensations already passed because I kept on going in a sense and held it in. And then it's like becomes sort of like, I'm just looking to get them off, but like my thing isn't happening anymore. I don't know if it's just my luck of not having maybe people that are on the same page or kind of wanting to, or it's my self pressure that I put on myself to like make sure every situation, like it's like a great result for the woman, that she was memorable. She had a great time. That's been kind of my struggle personally. I don't know if any others are out there doing. I'm sure there is a case like that out there too.
100%. I think that what you're talking about is actually very common for people of all genders. Some of us are just very giving lovers, and we get off on getting our partner off. There's nothing hotter than watching your partner get off. You're like,
right,
yeah,
totally.
and then you're doing it too. But I will say that, especially for people with vaginas, it usually foreplay is necessary. It takes, anywhere from like 10 to 20 minutes usually to get all of our parts warmed up and ready to go. We're not as instantaneous as people have, and that could be part of it for you. But also, sometimes people just don't get off, and it doesn't have anything to do with you necessarily. It could be a number of things. I mean, fuck, we're still sorry for swearing.
Go ahead. No, this is open forum. So clearly we're just going for it.
We're still in the middle of a pandemic.
Yeah.
This is like still going on. People are burnt out. We're stressed. We're like, what the heck is going on? Or we're having sex, but then we're like thinking, oh shit, tomorrow I have to wake up and da 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 da. And again, it's not because the sex is bad or boring or you're doing a bad job. It's just, sometimes our minds are all over the place. There's a million and one reasons why. But I think it's about having again, finding this kind of balance. One, you either need to find somebody who just loves getting off, and you can have that kind of give and take thing, that like equals it out for you. But also there's a pleasure in giving that doesn't always need to be dependent on the person getting off. Like you can enjoy giving just because like that makes you feel good, and you can still receive pleasure, it's not dependent on the other person. So that's just something to think about too.
Mm-hmm. And sometimes people get in bad habits, or, sometimes that just like they get used to one person doing all the work, or, that's another thing too in sex where you kind of become selfish because either you're not communicating or voicing to the other person's like, oh yeah, I'm just going to lay back and, receive constantly, and that could lead to a lot of things too, tensions down the road or whatnot, because one's not happy. That's again, communication too.
I think you bring up a really good point is that people get stuck in patterns.
Yeah.
We're all guilty of it, and it's okay. But like we're creatures of, a lot of us are creatures of habit, oh, we found one thing. Okay. Or especially if you're, seeing someone for an extended period of time. Yeah. It's easy to get in a loop. And so that's why, like you just said, it's important to communicate or be like, hey, can we switch? Let's switch it up. I want to try something new. And if the person's not able to meet you where you're at, then you're like, okay, well, maybe we need to take a pause, or I don't know, figure something else out, because again, your needs deserve to be met. Everyone's do. And that's like what the whole campaign with Ashley Madison, the sexual health as well, it's about closing the pleasure gap, and being like, hey, all of our needs are important. Let's figure out how we can literally and metaphorically like come together. You know what I mean?
Well, that's well said. Wow. I love the subliminal message there. Well done, Shelby. You're a pro. You mentioned the topic of foreplay, and I think that's so crucial that people sometimes overlook. It's just like, ooh, let's get to it. But like for women, especially, foreplay is huge. What are some, I guess, popular things or things that anyone can do to start up foreplay and improve things in a bedroom, especially for the guys that need to hear about this sort of thing? Like, what sort of things in foreplay they should try with a woman, or vice versa too? I mean, there's other ways. I mean, foreplay works technically every way. So what are I'm thinking too. I'm like, well, hell, everyone could use some foreplay. But what are the best foreplay methods then?
Well, I think that kissing is a great way to kick anything off. If you, again, it's dependent on if you enjoy kissing or not, but kissing is a great way to start connecting with someone. It releases oxytocin in your brain, and it starts to make you feel cuddly and comfortable and safe, right? And I think a huge part of sex has to do with comfortability and safety, because especially if we don't feel comfortable, our bodies lock up and it makes it like 10 times harder for us to actually achieve an orgasm. But so I think just starting slow and steady, being like, okay, and looking at sex as more of a practice versus an obligation. Like we all have been in school. We all know how much homework sucks for the most part. And like anything that you like have to do, you're kind of like,
it's a chore. Yeah.
Like I could go off on a tangent about being like, okay, well, first you touch here and then you bop it a beep and boop. The real thing is that like, it's about our perspective and how we're relating to sex. When we're excited about sex, we're excited about exploring our partner's bodies, about exploring our own bodies, and about coming together, right? But like, when we're looking at it as a chore or a task or just one other thing, I have to have sex with my husband before I go to bed tonight because he's not clawing at me. It's like, yeah, duh. No wonder sex isn't as pleasurable for you. It's about finding ways and being creative yourself and with your partner about how to, when you're feeling like you're kind of in a rut, maybe pull yourself out of it and be like, okay, we've been doing kind of the same thing a bunch and I'm kind of starting to feel like it's work versus something I'm looking forward to. Yeah. So what can we do differently, to step it up?
It's that communication. It all boils down to communication. Don't you notice? Like everything has to do with dialogue and speaking what you enjoy. And I feel like it sounds simple on the surface, but people have a tough time about telling what they enjoy and what they don't enjoy too. So like, why are you keep on doing something that they don't like, thinking that they might like it? Just say it's like, no, I don't, that doesn't turn me on, and it's okay then, because then at least you do something that turns them on, communication.
I know. I always feel like I'm on a loop because every interview I do, and even in my sessions with my clients on my page, it always boils down to that. Like when I first started in this career, I was like, sex, oh yeah. And after a while, you realize that literally everything comes down to the fundamentals. And so it's really important. And I find that with a lot of my clients, that's all we focus on is like, okay, let's practice workshopping how you want to say how you're feeling or like whatever it is. Because like you had kind of brought up earlier, sex is a very sensitive topic and people's feelings can get hurt really easily. Like you were saying, oh, when she didn't kiss me, I felt all of these things, right? Yeah. And it can bring up like our deep like insecurities or wounds or whatever from our childhood traumas, you name it. But communicating that takes a lot of courage and guts. And the framing is the most important part because you can't just like come out and say things sometimes. It's like, how can I say something that is delivered with compassion and love? And I probably sound silly right now, but like, that's what it is, because especially if your partner means something to you, you want to be able to be like, hey, I love our physical connection. And I'm really wanting to explore XYZ if that's something you would feel comfortable in. Or like, hey, babe, can we try there's this thing that I saw on this movie that looked really hot, let's try it. Or like whatever it is, and trying to find, the approach is everything. Approach is very important.
Oh, totally.
Mm-hmm.
I could see men and women being really attracted to you. You're very engaging and appealing in so many ways. I'm curious, what is like dating for you? Like, I wonder, like, are people intimidated by you because you have that knowledge of sex, in the sense, the guru version, like, oh my God, I can never live up to something with you. I'm wondering what it's like for you being kind of coaching others, but how do you deal with it yourself? Because you're obviously someone that's doing dating and life and in general in that way.
Well, I think that's a really fun question, because I am not immune to the perils of dating and sex. Like, I wish I was. That would be so cool. But I think that part of the draw of working with people and connecting with clients, friends, you right now, is that I've been through some shit. So that's the only reason that I feel like I'm able to, like talk about some stuff, is because I've seen it, the good, the bad, the ugly, the incredible sparks flying, love at first sight, but dating is hard. It's hard. And it's funny because people, when you're single, and if you've been single for a while, you're like, fuck, I can't wait to get into a relationship. I'm so ready. And then you get into a relationship and you're like, fuck, I forgot how much work this is.
It's
and
totally
like, oh,
true.
it's not just me anymore, And so I think it's like people understand it. Well, and myself too, in my journey, it's interesting. I think a lot of people do get intimidated because they're like, oh my gosh, how could I ever? And it's like, it really doesn't take a lot to please someone in bed if you have the fundamentals, right? If you have the communication, you have a little curiosity, and you have feelings for each other, feelings. I mean, being in love it's a whole other drug, and it can take your sex. Not that you can't have amazing sex without it, because you absolutely can, but it does something. But yeah, I think that dating is hard, and it's a commitment, and it's something that you have to commit yourself to every day, just like dating yourself. There's some days I wake up and I'm like, really, we got to do the skincare routine again, girl.
Right. Yeah. Keeping up, maintaining your look and appearance. Yep.
I don't want to go to yoga today. Like, I'm done, but you do it. And some days you take off, and, it's just being gentle and taking everything day by day.
What appeals to you about another person? Like, what sort of turn-ons do you have, or like interest? Like, what does it take for you to get interested in someone else? Like, basically, what sort of either personality qualities or physical qualities? Like, what do you find appealing?
That's interesting. I have been all over the map. I'm bisexual. And really, I could be attracted to anyone. I think what's important to me are people's values, and how they present themselves and how they're treating me in the relationship. I like people that are passionate about what they do. I like people that are funny. A lot of times I have a very big personality, and a lot of times I end up with people that some people would categorize as like maybe a little bit more shy and quiet, which I think is interesting. It's a good balance, but I've also been with people that have just as big of personalities as me. So it's really all over the place. And I think that that's one of the most beautiful things about dating, is that also there's so much validity in dating. Like, meeting and connecting with people, it doesn't have to be like a long-term forever relationship to be like an awesome relationship, and I've had tons of shorter term relationships that have meant the world to me, with people that I still am in contact with, that I'm grateful to have been with them for however many, like even one night stands, but it's really a mixed bag. Honestly, I'm open to a lot of different things. And I think that having an open mind has invited more love and like pleasure in my life, if that makes sense.
I think it makes a ton of sense. I think it's a huge point about being open-minded, because some people, when you do, especially online dating, you have these like checklists. I remember like having a good connection with this one girl, and she was like, "Oh, but you don't like country music. This isn't going to work out." Like, who gives a shit? You know what I mean? Like, how could you base a connection on that? You know, like we should have different interests. Like maybe I'll learn to like it knowing you, you know, like being open to different possibilities and not being so short and narrow-minded about something as not important, kind of irrelevant as like the music that you like potentially versus all the other factors. Like you mentioned, like how do they treat you? What kind of person they are, their values and morals, like that's going to affect you every way, you know, being with them, you know, what kind of a person they are and how do they treat you. But like the music align with you, like I like different music, like that should not be a deal breaker, right?
Well, maybe country music was this person's whole world and they needed someone to be involved in it. You know, it's different for everyone. Everyone has a different approach to dating. Some people value financial security,
That's true.
than emotional security, you know, or whatever it is. Like, and that's what I think makes dating so hard because, and not that I'm not trying to discourage anybody, because when you do, there are so many fish in the sea and so many wonderful people to connect with.
Yeah.
But it's just trying to find people that you can align with. Like, do your values align with them? If this person only wants to listen to country music and that's a deal breaker for them, they need to continue on in their journey, you know, and that frees you up to find someone who might not be, you know, as nitpicky about the music stuff and that you can, you know, not that that person's nitpicky, but you know what it is.
Yeah, no.
You're better suited for.
I think it's all about, also the big thing is about people being stuck, especially when we talk about marriages and like lifeless marriages that lead to divorce. But like even in relationships early on, it's just like you're stuck. Like I've been single for 5 years and I want a relationship, but I'd rather be single than be in something that doesn't make me happy ultimately, or that has no long-term potential or something that's missing, right? That's like a big issue is when people are stuck in things that they don't. And I saw my sister all her life. She's potentially wasted like 15 years with wrong people, you know, because she just felt comfortable. And now she looks back, she's like, holy shit, you know, I wasn't living my life, you know, and that's the thing too. And like, it's tough for her. She's, you know, in her early 40s. And like, now I see her living, she's going on dates, she's meeting interesting people. And before she was stuck in these dead end relationships with these guys who were just literally holding her down and just not decent people, like would make her feel bad about herself. And, you know, I mean, that's sort of like toxic relationship, you know, and I've seen it firsthand and just like, wow, when you get out of that, when you allow yourself to, you know, explore and be like, you know, I can be okay on my own. Oh my gosh, it's a world of possibility.
Yeah. So how did you get unstuck?
It was just, well, we all hated him, my mom, me, all of her friends. That doesn't help when the guy's completely a douche day in, day out, you know? And it came to a point where it's just like she wasn't even having sex with him. She just like, it was like, they were like roommates. And it was just like, why are you with this person? Because, you know, and there's manipulation involved too, sadly. You know, you kind of make someone feel bad about themselves to hold them in, you know, they kind of take on that thing, you know, and are subjected to it, sadly, you know, and just at some point it came where like, everyone's convincing over the years, you know, and seeing where's this going, you know, and the moment she knew when they went on a vacation and he proposed to her and she was like, oh no, you know, like it's like, she's like, oh no, this ruined my trip. And that is not a good reaction when that ruins your trip, a proposal, right?
Yeah. That
and
sounds
she
like
knew
a
that
moment right there. Yeah. The great thing, you know, about being stuck is that you know that you can get unstuck.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that it's really hard to remember that when we're in that place, when we're in the stuckness, because
it's tough though too, I'd imagine, especially in some relationships, especially emotionally or physically abusive. That's the worst kind of, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. But there is always, you know, I think it's important to remember that as human beings, we all have agency, we all have choice, you know, in our lives, and we can do anything we want. You know, hopefully we're respectful with that power. But we have the capacity to choose the life that we want to live, and I think that if anyone is listening and they've gotten out of a toxic or very unhealthy, abusive relationship and you got out, good for you. You need to celebrate yourself and just be like, fuck, I made it out. If you've done anything in your life, at least you've done that. You're strong, you're resilient, and like you got this. And my belief is that we all deserve to find somebody who makes us feel seen, heard, safe, and validated, right? Not someone that completes us, because that's a little codependent, but somebody that compliments us and holds us down, not in an uncomfortable way, but just like has our back. So sometimes it seems like you're like, it's never going to happen. And usually I find that in those darkest times, it's like right around the corner. So
that's so interesting. It's always, I completely agree. Even like career wise, like you're in my slump, like you're doing what I do and it's a tough industry and you're not getting any breaks and opportunities. And then it's just like, why am I doing this? And then just when you kind of get down to yourself, it's something reappears out of nowhere. It's so true in life. Like I almost believe certain things like you mentioned earlier that I have a feeling that, certain people are good for certain periods of time in your life to help you get through certain periods. Like they're only supposed to be there for a certain time at a certain point in your life. And it's okay if it doesn't work out. And even if they were great or not, you learn and they were there for a reason to get you through to the next point and help you move. Is that a true mindset in the sort of things that people come into your life for a certain reason, even if you might envision something different with them, that it just served a purpose?
Yeah, I believe that. I think that if we had the mindset going into every single relationship that this is the one, this is it, this person is supposed to meet every single one of my needs and do all this, like that is such a tall order to fill, and I think it'll probably keep you from being in some very fulfilling relationships, because try to force somebody into this box of forever. It's it'll make me.
It's a lot of pressure for yourself too, I'd imagine.
Yeah, exactly, because you don't know, and people change. Like even if you've been with somebody for 10 years, or whatever, like people are subject to change, and that's okay. It doesn't make them bad, and it doesn't minimize your worth. You know what I mean? I think the best thing that we can do in relationships is just honor where we're at, and like, is it tough to be like, you know what, maybe we're not as aligned as we thought that we were, and maybe it is the best decision to break up. Yeah, it's fucking tough and it sucks, but I think being able to do that in a respectful way, it tells a lot about who you are as a person. And if you choose to stick it out and then a year later you're like, holy shit, I can't believe we made it through that dark time and now our relationship is better than it ever has been, but you're not going to be able to do any of that without these core foundations that we've been talking about: the honesty, the communication, the trust, you name it. But I can't imagine my life if I didn't have certain relationships, relationships of all kinds, because they have served such a great purpose. They've helped shape me into who I am today. And I'm constantly learning about myself in this job. So I think it's important to just be open to love and just not try to put confines around it, just let it surprise you a little bit.
You're never a finished product. If you think you are, you're in trouble then, always something to learn.
Yeah, it's coming.
Yeah. As we're wrapping up here, I listened to your podcast. I was at the gym, so that's a good time to listen to One Night Stand, when you talk about that at the gym. But you have a really good podcast. I'm already into it. I'm definitely going to be listening more to it. Tell me about like where more people can reach you and about your podcast. I think it's really cool, and you tackle a lot of cool and interesting topics.
Thank you. Yes. So the podcast is called Emotional Check-In. And we have Instagram. It's on Spotify, iTunes, Apple Podcasts or whatever. Just look up Emotional Check-In. It's me and my great, great friend, Bree. Online, my Instagram is at Shelby Sells Love, and her Instagram is at Bree Says Hella. And check out at Emotional Check-In. And yeah, I hope to see you there. Hit me up.
Yeah, you two have great chemistry, and I like you take questions and everything. It's like literally a session, in that way. So that's cool. How did you guys come about it? I'm curious. Well, you've been doing this for a while, or just been a plan to come to this podcast? I thought it had a really cool dynamic.
Oh, thank you. We've been friends for like about a decade, if not longer. And one day, Bree was just like, I think we should do a podcast. And we were like, okay, like, let's break it down. What do we want to do? And we're like, let's just do it like two friends chatting. And it kind of just took off from there. And it's been so nice. Like, our community has grown, and everyone's like, oh, listening to you, it feels like I'm hanging out with my girlfriend. So it's been really wonderful journey. Yeah.
That's a cool reaction. When people can relate and feel like they're part of something, you know what I mean? That's when like that's kind of genuine, and you have like a good listener fan base then.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely.
And feel free to be part of it too, with questions and whatnot, like that's always the best.
Hear from you,
I got tons of questions. I'll be writing in probably too soon. Watch you be opening up and reading it there. Yeah. I always need help with something, but like you said, we're on a life journey. It's interesting. Even someone in your field, like you said, you go through all the same struggles and issues that everyone else does. And I think that's the best way. I feel that myself and what I do too, is to appeal to people because you know what? I get to talk to cool people such as yourself. But it's cool because we all share so many things in common, with dating and life. And like, even some of us are experts and pros and doing this and that, but we have so much relatability to everyone who's listening. I always felt like the best compliment for me is like someone's like, yeah, I know a guy like him, like I could hang with him, that sort of thing.
Totally. I couldn't agree more. Mm-hmm.
That's so great. And your Instagram, I saw you also have some cool TikTok videos and everything. So if you need vibrator recommendation, I've seen that. You had some stuff up there too.
Oh my God. I'm just so grateful because a lot of the branded content that I do, I know it's annoying, but the reason that I pick the people that I work with is because I think it's really important to have, like, to show resources, like half of the stuff I wouldn't even know about unless these people reached out to me. And I'll tell you what, my sexual health Rolodex has expanded so much. Like,
really,
toys, lube, places to go to get like virtual STI screenings. Like,
wow.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I didn't even know that was a thing. That's really important, actually,
and yeah, and especially for people with vaginas, I mean, hello, hi, but so many different products that are great for us, things like pH balance, blah, 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 blah. I could go off on a little tangent, but check it out. It's nice to just scroll through and be like, okay. And if you don't want to try that product, then maybe it sparks something in your head that you're like, I didn't even think about that, or let me do some more research. And that's kind of my whole purpose. Is I'm not saying that I know everything about everything, because that would be so silly. I love keeping a beginner's mindset, even though I'm accumulating so much information. But I think that sparking, an idea, or just like getting people excited or curious about something is really important to figure out what works best for you. Because I can only talk about me, but I really just want to provide as many resources as I can to my audience.
You're the best kind of guinea pig for love and sex. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's the best. You try yourself, and it probably will work for some, maybe for not. But you know what? The honesty at the end of the day is what will stick with people. As long as you're honest and genuine about what you're saying, and really believe and have the passion clearly. That's what draws people, and like I said, you have a very dynamic personality. I've been like shamelessly flirting with you throughout.
I'm a Libra. Bring it on, yeah.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm a Virgo, so maybe that seems like that's pretty straight on to what I am in that case. This has been so much fun, Shelby. I'm so glad you took the time to talk to me. We went over time, but I had so many questions, and you're doing some really cool things out there.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. I appreciate it. And if you ever want to have me back, I'm here.
Definitely. This is definitely part one, I'm guessing, because there's going to be a lot more to talk about and love to connect with you. So let's keep this going.
All right. Sounds good.
Take care, Shelby. Have a good one.
Bye, you too.
Bye-bye.